Welcome to the Steelers by the Lake podcast. My name is James Strong, joined once again by my co-host Cody Tanner and special guest Nick Pretzel. Gentlemen, how are you on this Victory Monday?
Oh, Victory Monday. I'm doing fantastic. Nick, how are you doing?
It's a Victory Monday. Can't be anything but.
It is. Oh, my Lanta, James. We can't forget about you. James, how are you doing today?
You already know how I'm doing on this Victory Monday, buddy. We're popping them. Yes, it's just an energy drink. It is not a beer, although it could be. I'm done working for the day, so why not? But I'm not gonna.
Because you got to work tomorrow.
I do have to work tomorrow, and I'd like to drive after this, so I'd rather not be drinking.
That's fair. He has to go see his lady. Shout out to Erica. So also shout out to Sarah, the wife of our lovely Nick Pretzel up here. They have hosted me recently, and they're great hosts, and they're fun to hang out with. So shout out to her as well. All right, now it's time, James and Nick, special guest Nick. For those of you who haven't noticed that he's here yet, he's, if you're watching on YouTube, he's over here. If you're listening, he's around. We got Steelers news. We got Steelers news before the game that happened. And then we'll talk about this game recap and go over the Commanders versus Steelers impressive game. And there's a lot of things to talk about with this game, a lot of things to go over. Good, bad, ugly, interesting, confusing, lots of things. Before we go too far, Zach Frazier, the center, and the running back and kick return specialist, Cordarrelle Patterson, or as the other good friend of the podcast, Noah Wagers, calls him, Quarter Pounder Patterson, both back on the 53-man roster and ready to play football this week. So that was very exciting. Especially the Zach Frazier one was a little bit more exciting to me personally than the Cordarrelle Patterson. But again, it is what it is. Also, Tyler Matakevich and wide receiver Ben Skoranek activated to the 53-man roster. Very interesting. We talked about Skoranek on the pregame show a little bit. James, you want to talk about the guys that were released because of that?
I do, but I'm surprised you passed the microphone for this one.
I did, because I don't want to talk about him at all. I don't want to talk about him at all.
Jonathan Ward released from the 53-man roster. That's due to the healthiness of Cordarrelle Patterson. Finally, all three running backs are healthy. So Jonathan Ward, odd man out. Look for him to end up back on the practice squad again. The next gentleman is the reason I was so surprised Cody passed the buck here. Terrell Edmonds, his arch rival, his nemesis, has been released from the team. That was to make room for Tyler Matakevich. Number 44 in your programs, number 1 in your hearts.
Yep. He is number 1 in my heart. Totally number 1 in my heart. You want my honest opinion about, I can't even do it right now. That's fine. But I don't want to go on a tangent about, I was going to do something, but I can't do it with the way we're set up right now. That's fine. Both those guys out. Jonathan Ward, I felt like we saw a lot better of him in preseason. Terrell Edmonds, I don't think we've ever really saw better of him, so it's fine. He's gone. Anyways, let's go over inactives for this game, James, before we talk about the breakdown.
Yeah, so inactives, very predictable. Really, Kyle Allen. Emergency third string quarterback, Scotty Miller in inactive, which is a new thing. But of course, with the acquisition of Mike Williams, that was the way that was always going to go. CJ Henderson, Nick Herbig still not healthy with that hamstring injury. And then Max Sharping, his first time on the healthy scratch list. So that's a good sign for the health of the offensive line when Max Sharping is actually a healthy scratch, because he's like the back end backup offensive interior guy, guard center, whatever you want to call him. So happy to see that change to the active roster there.
Yeah. Now it's time to go over this game, and then we'll talk a little bit about things afterwards as well. But initial thoughts on this game. Nick, share any initial thoughts you had on the game. We'll bounce it to James, and then I'll share anything before we go with the positional breakdown that we normally do.
Yeah, I had a lot of notes that I took down on some of the plays here, so I'm sure we'll get into those. But I thought overall I was very pleased with it. I saw a lot of breakdowns going into the game of just previous play from both teams and people given their thoughts on the matchup going in. And I can't count on my fingers or my toes how many people were counting the Steelers out of this game. So to come out with a victory, even when I thought we played a little bit sloppy, is a huge win in my opinion. It shows that if we do things right and better, we can do even better than we did in that game, which I think all in all is a net positive. I don't think we played our best, but we came out with the victory and with some tidying up of a few penalties and misplays here and there, and some better hands for a particular DB. We will do a lot better moving forward, and I'm very, very pleased with the result and outcome, if I'm not entirely pleased with the product that was put out.
Yeah, no, that's fair. James, what you got for the game overall?
Yeah, I agree with Nick that there were definitely a decent amount of sloppy moments in this game that could be tidied up, but it was an instrumental game for the progress of the season. A lot of non-Steeler fans will point to the schedule of who Pittsburgh has played so far. Well, it's no wonder they're 6-2. They haven't played any good teams. I'm sure both of you guys have heard it. I'm sure a lot of the listeners and viewers have heard this as well, right? I like to immediately point back to the fact that the Falcons are looking pretty good now, and we really owned them week 1. Chargers are looking pretty decent, and we put a beating on them as well. So to me, this was a very instrumental game that you had to win for people to start taking you serious. Now, this is just step 1. You got to continue this. You got to beat the Ravens. You got to beat the Eagles, the Chiefs, some of the other elite teams that are still remaining on the schedule. We have some of the best teams in the entire NFL on the schedule remaining still. This was one of the top teams in the NFC. So to win this game, even though it was only by a point, still a very important thing to do to be taken serious on the grand scheme of things on the season.
Yeah. And then just a fun fact here. This is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, I'm double checking my facts before I say something that's incorrect. This is the first time in the entire season that Pittsburgh scored at least 7 points in every quarter. And it just so happened we scored exactly 7 points in every quarter. So we have had games where we've scored more points in quarters. I think we put up 14 in the fourth one game and 14 in the second one game and stuff like that. But this is the first game that we did put up at least 7 in every quarter. So
another slightly sadder fact, it's also the first game where we allowed any points in the third quarter. So.
Yep, that was on my list of things to talk about, which was very sad. So, yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh has been a second half team throughout the season so far. I mean, maybe except for one game, I think we might have put up two scores or 3 scores in the first half, which was really impressive. But yeah, losing that third quarter streak of not allowing any points was really sad, especially with just how I thought methodical that first drive Washington had out of the half was. They scored pretty quick and easily on that drive, it felt like. But again, my overall things here is we're seeing still, even though Russell Wilson threw his first interception, we're seeing improvement from him. 3 touchdowns. All those passes were good passes placed in only a position that the wide receiver could get it. One of them placed in only a position that, and tight end. One of them passed in only a position that George Pickens could catch, it felt like. So not even a wide receiver, but George Pickens specifically. And then I also felt that the defense played well, even though there were a lot of, and we'll get to this, missed calls in this game. TJ Watt easily could have had a safety if they called holding on a pass rush in the end zone. We could have had a blocked field goal if I don't even know who it was coming off the corner. I think it was Dante Jackson. Didn't get held very, very bad and blatantly.
Right across the face.
Yeah. So before we even get to this, I mean, because we're going to get to the breakdown later on, any of the fans of Washington or any of the fans that just hate Pittsburgh that want to say, the refs gave it to us with that first down that they called at the end of the game, that first down they didn't give Washington. 2 things that we need to explain here. And James, I think you're going to like that we're getting into the nitty gritty of this real quick. Forward momentum forward progress when you're moving backwards only matters in the end zone. If you catch the ball in the end zone and your momentum takes you out of the end zone, it's still a touchdown because you had possession of the ball across the plane. If forward momentum does not matter if you're going backwards for a first down line, because the play doesn't stop when you pass the first down. So if you move backwards after catching the ball and you have it beyond the first down, and then you yourself move backwards, that forward progress does not count because you're not fighting against anybody and the play doesn't end when you get past the first down. For anyone who has an issue with that, that's the definition. That's how it works. Period. Now, I understand that ball was really, really close. They could have put that down in 2 or 3 different spots, and you would have said, that's a fair spot. And 2 of those might have been first down. The other one might have been not first down. It doesn't matter. That play did not define the game. Don't care what you say. We missed the blocked field goal. We missed the safety. It is what it is. They had a chance to win. They didn't win. Anyways, let's break it down. Let's get into the Russell Wilson conversation, James, and talk about these players and how they performed.
Yeah, and also on that play you were just talking about there, I don't think anyone knows that rule better than Steelers fans, right?
Yep.
Because for years we watched Deontay Johnson catch the ball and start running backwards, get tackled behind the first down marker, and it didn't matter that he caught it past it because he went on his own accord backwards.
Yep.
Been that rule the same way since the beginning of football. So if you don't understand that, I'm sorry, but maybe pick up a book and learn the football world a little bit more. Don't drop
that mic.
Russell Wilson,
don't drop that mic, James. It's expensive.
Steelers pen. There you go.
There.
Before I get too far, too, I forgot to do this earlier in the show. Shout out to Tanner McCall. Tanner's still listening to the show, still watching us after all these years. Joe reached out to him yesterday. Joe Wasinski, good friend of the show, also reached out to him yesterday and found that out. So Tanner, appreciate you still listening. Good to hear you're doing well, buddy. Russell Wilson, very up and down performance in my game, in my opinion here. When things really mattered the most, when you needed to get that touchdown, when you needed to get that conversion, he came through just enough times, right? As Cody mentioned earlier, all 3 touchdown passes were perfect throws, either where only the receiver could get it, or only specifically George Pickens, as Cody mentioned on that one throw. Not too many guys are bringing that in, but George does that sort of thing. So you have to be encouraged by the 3 touchdown passes. Obviously, we would like to see a higher completion percentage, but I felt like a lot of that was Russ running for his life because the protection was breaking down pretty quickly on a pretty regular basis in this game. I think a little bit of that is just the pass rush, and it seemed like a lot of twists and stunts being ran by Washington that was kind of confusing the interior specifically. But you just got to do a little bit better job of protecting him and giving him time if you want to see that protection or that completion percentage go up a little bit higher. Because there are a few times he just had to get rid of the thing.
Yep. No, I agree. I felt Russell played fairly well, took too many sacks. I mean, there's only 3. It wasn't a huge number, but I would have liked to seen a little bit more ability to either extend plays or at least get the ball away and not take those loss of 23 yards. 14-28 does not look good. But again, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. I mean, you're putting points on the board. 3-to-1 ratio is phenomenal in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Most quarterbacks in their NFL career don't average a 3-to-1 ratio. So that is very impressive, to say the least. But again, I thought the biggest thing we saw from Russell in this game is those moon balls. We talked about it. That's his specialty. That's why they brought Mike Williams in. They thought that would be a good thing for George to have, and it's proving to be the case. So with all of that being said, I thought this was a good game for Russell because of the same reason that Justin had good games where he didn't lose it. And that sounds worse than what it is. I'm not like saying, Russell didn't do enough to win or do this or that. He threw 3 touchdowns. Pittsburgh, unfortunately, couldn't stop Jaden Daniels and this offense and the running game. They had 3 rushing touchdowns, which, again, one of those was because of a short field, which we'll get into that a little bit later. Actually, we can probably get into it now because it's technically a passing stat. But, again, I thought Russell played well, put up points. That's what we needed him to do. And in the end, we didn't lose the game because of him. So I like it.
Yeah, and you have to be happy about that acquisition of Mike Williams. Again, we talked about this on the last show, only a 5th-round pick given up for him, and it will be whichever one is the lowest one on the totem pole. Man, showing up week 1 like that with a game-winning touchdown, making Omar Khan look like a genius. The other one makes him look like even more of a genius, but we're going to touch on that when we get to the defensive side. Nick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Russell Wilson's performance today or yesterday.
Yeah. Russell, in my opinion, looked very good. He didn't look great, but I thought he looked good. I was one of the harder people on Russell Wilson even after the initial change. I thought he looked a little rusty in the first game and my comments on the videos evidence that. You can go check back and see my comments on how I thought he was underthrowing and how he made some poor decisions. And there were still some plays where, as both of you mentioned, he held on to it a little too long or just ran the wrong way and ran right into the oncoming pass rush, which again, not entirely his fault. The line was not giving him as much protection as he needed. But as I was watching the game, I was actually texting a good buddy of mine. Shout out to Jim Schillinglaw down in Cody's old stomping ground of Texas.
Yeah.
But he was getting a little mad about the moon balls. And I was like, that's what we brought him in for. That's why we brought Mike Williams. And, he puts those balls up there where only our guys can get it. And sometimes it's going to end up being an interception. And in my opinion, it's a little surprising that this was the first one. But I'll take it. And I thought overall he managed the game well. And like you said, in those moments where we needed him to come out and be a hero and bring out the big play, he brought out the big plays. And it was sometimes to George Pickens on the sideline, sometimes to Mike Williams in the end zone, a couple times to Calvin Austin and Freiermuth over the middle, which I'm loving us using the middle of the field more and getting Freiermuth more involved, especially near the goal line. So I'm really enjoying seeing what Russell's bringing to the offense. I am happy to have been wrong on the Mike Tomlin decision to switch there. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of it, especially with the Mike Williams connection. He was only brought in on Tuesday, and he had a very limited package, and we saw immediate payoff from it. So, like James said, Omar Khan looking like a genius, and I'm excited to see more of that genius play out through the rest of the season.
And real quick on the interception, the ball wasn't drastically overthrown. I felt like George Pickens didn't find it early enough.
I would agree.
But at that, it ended up just basically like a punt. It was like 40 yards down the field. Pickens was able to down him while he was still on the ground, so there was no return involved in the play.
I mean, there was a return involved in the play, but it didn't count.
Yeah, a return that should not have counted. Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like also, like George is probably going to get some flack for the way he treated the guy that tried to block him, but he knew the play was over.
Yeah.
Like, George knew that he touched the guy. He knew that he was down, and he knew that guy was about to try to take a cheap shot at him, and he wasn't going to let it happen. So I kind of respect it.
George is becoming not a laughingstock, but just a hysterical person to watch play football because of his
after
antics.
An elbow drop last game.
Elbow drop last game, which I don't even think he meant to do that. It's awkward. He does things. He tried to jump stiff arm this week, which if you've ever tried to stiff arm somebody, being in the air while doing that does not work. That's not how physics work. I saw a TikTok earlier that talked about that. It's hysterical.
It's like he's button mashing out there.
He's literally playing Madden as a little kid, just hitting every button on the thing. I mean, Saquon Barkley is too, but it's working with a spin move, backwards hurdle. I mean, it's insane. But watching George is hysterical because I genuinely think after watching some things and doing my own research and kind of getting to know George a little more, I do feel like he's a good guy. I don't feel like he's the drama AB like that we've experienced in the past. He's just a little bit of a diva in how he expresses things in moments. And it's not, I don't think it's necessarily unhealthy right now. I think it's just really funny to watch. I mean, even how he tries to throw blocks with his back and like, it's just a humorous to watch him play football and go out there. I mean, that jump stiff arm against four guys and he was ready to take every single one of them on. It was hysterical.
And he had that jump cut on that one deep ball too, where he juked out like four guys when he did it, and then he tried a second one. And it's entertaining football, and some of it is producing some really nice results.
He looks like a deer galloping through the street, dodging cars. Literally,
his stride is long, man. Yeah,
buzzing right here on my wall.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How dare you shoot him?
I definitely can agree with that, James, on the interception. I honestly thought that the interception was a little bit on Pickens because I thought if he looked like he hesitated a bit there. And if he takes 2 more steps, he gets at least a hand in there to break it up, and it's an incomplete pass. Or do a George Pickens play and just one hand it and bring it down. So honestly, I think George knew it too, because like you said, it was Mike Sanderstill, who you and I were both high on during draft season, who George then decides to go full John Cena on and after the play. I think letting a little bit of his frustration of knowing, I could have taken 2 more steps and prevented that. But yeah, no, I think that was a little more on George, and I think he knows it a little bit too.
Well, you guys want to stay in the wide receiver room since we're talking George Pickens as much as we are.
We can. Let's hop over. It's as much special teams as it is passing. So let's talk about it briefly.
Right.
The Miles Killebrew pass on 4th down. 9 times out of 10, I think that's a bad call. This time, the way that, and James, we talked about it before the show. I'll let you share that. The way that you have that audible set up to where when that it's literally one on no one. That blocker, that gunner, he's not a gunner.
The jammer
came over and was going to blitz and try to block the punt. Whatever audible set up to where Miles Killebrew can just say something or make a noise or whatever he does to get that snap. That was a beautifully timed fake, beautifully called fake, beautifully executed, except for the fact that apparently James Pierre can't catch. Very unfortunate. Very like that would have. I don't think this game was as close as it looked on paper. I think if we get that conversion there, we go get another touchdown or at least a field goal that drive. 10-0 to start the game off. I don't think you allow James. We talked about that. I think it was you. I talked about the Commanders had no momentum up to that point, so I'm not upset with that at all. So again, James, I'll let you talk about that special teams play real quick, and then we can move on to the wide receiver room.
Yeah, and this is something that just kind of shows the genius of Danny Smith coaching wise. This is a built-in audible that if they see this happen, you immediately call this, right? It's very similar to if you see a fake field goal and it's a run to one side where one side is overloaded, they'll just audible and immediately fake to the other side and know that they have the numbers and they should be able to convert. So similar idea. You got your gunner out there, who is the guy that's going to go cover the punt. The jammer's the defender opposite him. He comes in and is going to attempt to block the punt. In doing so, there's no one out there. Automatically is a direct snap to Miles Killebrew, who's the personal protector on the play. He throws a great ball, and James Pierre is 5 yards past the first down marker when it hits him between the 4 and the 2 in his chest, and just he can't come up with it. And unfortunately, as Nick said pregame, that's how we know that he's in the right position. He's a defensive back, not a wide receiver, because he can't catch. Yep. So just unfortunate, because who's the other gunner out there? It's Ben Skoranek, a wide receiver. So had it gone the other way, and I think that's probably part of the strategy there, is if you're going to leave somebody uncovered, you leave the DB uncovered, not the wide receiver.
Yep.
But had it gone the other way, I bet Ben catches it and runs for 20 or 30 yards before somebody gets to him.
Yep.
So just a little bit of bad luck, but a perfectly executed play outside of that. So you can't really be upset with that. If you are, it's kind of irrational, because the odds are in your favor executing that play the way it was.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Bouncing back to that wide receiver room that we're going to talk about, George was 5 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. Mike Williams was 1 for 1, baby. He only needed one shot. He was only targeted once. He caught the ball once, and it was 1 touchdown. So a phenomenal game from him. I don't care that it was 1. If you got that out of him every game, we're pretty satisfied with that trade. And I think there's a genuine chance we do get that from him. I mean, he wasn't in there very often, and when he was, we mostly used him as like a decoy. Up until the one play where it was, that was designed to go to him. That was the first read option, in my opinion, based on looking at that play, and probably was designed from the coverage. That was probably a Russell Wilson decision. So great play from him. Jaylen Warren had 2 receptions for 29 yards. Good job with run after the catch from him. Calvin Austin 2 for 20. I thought he had a quiet game, but he was targeted 6 times on paper, which is crazy to see that number. And then Pat Fryermuth 3 catches for a touchdown on that quick out route over there on the goal line. Darnell was 1 for 6, and then a couple other guys were targeted with no catches, including that unfortunate James Pierre target. So I don't know what you guys want to talk about specifically here. We talked about Mike Williams. We talked about George a lot already. Pat, being consistent, always being a downfield target, red zone target. So love that from him.
I felt like Russ wasn't on the same page necessarily, not necessarily on the same page. He was just a little bit off with Calvin Austin all game long. And a lot of times in those situations, Calvin had his guy beat.
Yep.
So if the two of them start getting in the same page with this, as far as where Russ needs to put the ball to catch Calvin in stride, we're going to start seeing a lot of big plays out of Calvin Austin. And I think we're going to see less and less going to Van Jefferson in upcoming weeks. I felt like this week was going to be the transition week where you saw a little bit of Mike Williams. I think next week we're going to see a large amount of Mike Williams and less of Van Jefferson, and I think that's probably a good thing. I don't hate Van Jefferson. I just think Mike Williams is a better receiver, and we're going to see better production out of him than we've seen out of Van Jefferson thus far. So I'm really optimistic to where this wide receiver room is going to go in the future here, and happy to see a little bit more targeting to Pat Freiermuth because, man, he's a good weapon. Just get him the opportunity, and he's great at yards after contact. In the most reliable hands probably on the team, in my opinion, as once again shown here with 3 targets and 3 catches.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say real quick about the Calvin Austin things, there were a couple times where I was frustrated with the choice to pass to him because he was downfield felt like he was being thrown a jump ball in double coverage. Was very confused as to why we were doing that when we have guys like George and Darnell and Pat and now Mike Williams on the team, all these guys that are much better at jump balls and deep balls than Calvin Austin, unless you're going to put it right in his breadbasket when he's running, past somebody, which we almost got to see that. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out. But again, hopefully they can get that kind of reeled in and perform those plays a little bit better next week. And the Calvin Austin is definitely a deep threat down the seams and down the sidelines. If he's in single coverage and can beat his man, he's pretty fast. So we talked about that. Nick, do you have anything else you want to talk about with any of those receivers?
Yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more of Calvin Austin in some slant routes as well. I think with his speed that he can easily burn guys, especially if we can get George and Mike Williams on the exterior to pull some guys away from the middle of the field, get Calvin Austin on a quick route across. That's going to be dangerous. I'm looking forward to that immensely. But also, I'd like to see another guy that you just mentioned, Cody Darnell Washington, get involved a little bit more. We've loved seeing some of the mismatches we got with him earlier in the season when Justin Fields was at the helm. I'd like to see a little bit more of that with Russell Wilson because that man is a mountain. And there's a reason his college nickname was the Pterodactyl. He has a wingspan like no one would ever believe. So to see him get involved a little bit more, I think will open up things as well, or at least different opportunities. And I saw him on the field quite a bit. It just, the packages didn't open up this game. So I'm sure he will get those opportunities. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. And as Russell Wilson settles in more to the offense, I'm sure we'll see it.
You know what I think is a really underrated skill for Darnell Washington is he's really good catching the ball, right? We see him catch it darn near every time it's thrown his direction. The ability of that man who is extremely tall individual to get his shoulder almost to the ground when somebody tries to tackle him is just incredible, man. The first guy almost never gets him when he has the opportunity to get that shoulder down because he just plows him. He somehow gets that shoulder like inches from the ground and just trucks whoever the first guy is every single time. And I think that's just a unique skill set for a guy so big and so tall.
Yeah. His wingspan, so to put in perspective, he's what, 6'7"?
Yep. Yeah.
His wingspan is 6'9" and change.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's a big boy.
He's a big boy naturally, but his arms are also just, ginormous in length. So again, let's go ahead and bounce to the running back room, and then we can talk about the offensive line here. I thought the running back room it played well, but it was quiet. Najee Harris only averaged 2.5 yards per carry on 21 carries for 53 yards. Jaylen Warren was the lead back in yards with 14 carries and 66 yards with a 4.7 average. And then Cordarrelle Patterson, 3 for 14. George had a run. Russell had 4 for literally 3 yards. Anything crazy. I did not think the holes were there the same for Najee as they have been in the past. And I don't know what the problem was. If it was just the quality of the defensive line that we were going up against, which I don't think it was. If we're dealing with hidden injuries, or if we're not getting the reads right, or if there's one play that I think Broderick was going down the line and he just forgot to look to see if anyone was coming from the outside. I don't know what the problem is there, or if that was just not as high up in the play design this week, if they were more focused on passing the ball with the addition of Mike Williams. I don't know what happened there. James, maybe you have something to say.
I would say that I think that we're seeing a little bit of what we saw safety into the ball, and then it's just one.
James, go ahead and say that again for me real quick.
So I feel like it's a lot similar to what it was early on in the season, where when Najee's the running back, they bring a safety up and put an extra man in the box, which makes it very difficult to account for everyone in the blocking scheme.
Yep.
So I felt like he had some holes, and he hit a few nice runs where he'd hit like that 8 to 10 yards, but a lot of them where he's running go. And then the flip side of it, Jaylen Warren seemed to have a little bit more room. Oftentimes they back off as they're not as concerned when he's on the field, but we got to get him to have a little bit better ball security. That's been an issue for him as a Steeler. I do understand that the NFL has said that should not have been ruled a fumble in that particular situation.
Yep.
But the same thing is, if you don't put it on the ground, then they don't have to decide whether it's a fumble or not. So Jaylen has got to do a better job of securing that football, because he's the explosive guy out of the two of them. He's the one that breaks the big runs for Pittsburgh. So got to see him securing that football, especially in that situation where you're about to put it in for a touchdown. Man, that's an awful position to be fumbling the football. It's giving you the opportunity to put a game away, and you're literally fumbling that opportunity away.
Yep. Very unfortunate. Nick, what you got?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the Warren fumble as well. Big proponent of letting the refs not blow that whistle so early. I believe it was during the Raiders game, or potentially the Giants game, maybe both, where I felt they were blowing the whistle very early and calling forward progress way too soon. So as much as I hated that we lost the ball on the play, I was very happy that the refs didn't just immediately blow the whistle and call forward progress. I think they do that on us way too much when we get positive gains that get pushed back further. So I'm hoping that in the future it works out for us and they continue to let us get the forward progress and don't just blow it dead. Now, I also hope they rule better and don't call it a fumble, but that is what it is there. And in terms of the offensive line, I think I know the play you were talking about, Cody. I made a note of it here. Broderick Jones went towards the interior of the line,
yep,
where all of the blocks had already been met. And then there was, I believe it was Frankie Louvu comes in and gets a sack on Russell Wilson. And it was Darnell Washington and I believe Michael Pruitt on the outside, because we had two tight ends in. They met the guy on the edge, but then Frankie Louvu just goes unblocked, and Broderick Jones just standing there trying to figure out who he's supposed to be blocking.
That was the play.
And got caught with his pants down, essentially. So it would, if he had remained and kind of just backed up a little bit, he might have been able to set the block instead of going left towards a guy that already had two guys on him, in McCormick and Frazier. But they also were having a bit of trouble holding that interior spot, so I can kind of see why he was leaning there to help. They got beat by Dante Fowler there several times, I believe, for 2 sacks during this game. So I can see why he wanted to go that way, to sort of assist with where they had been getting beat. But on that particular play, it allowed a free rusher to the quarterback, and it ended up being a sack.
Yeah, so the play that I thought, so it wasn't a running play. We're talking about the running backs. It wasn't a running play that block happened. But again, I think that goes back to talking about how I wasn't sure. But James, you're right. When Najee's in there, and that was almost the frustrating part. Najee was out for a little bit with what appeared to be some kind of injury or, discomfort in one of his legs. And then the first play he came back in, they tried to run it. He got tackled for like a 2-yard loss. And I'm like, you can't just run it every time he's in there. Like the first play he's in there, you got to do more play action. I wish that we would utilize it more. Russell Wilson is very good at play action. But I'm hoping that the blocking does get better moving forward. This was a decent defense. You were right. Dante Fowler with 2 sacks. Louvu had the other one. Obviously, we talked about that as well. But I do hope that we either incorporate different schemes or we can get our man's. I mean, and that specific play, Nick, that me and you were both thinking of, maybe that was just a they showed blitz on the left side, happened to blitz on the right side. There's a lot of things that I don't remember about that play. I don't have access to the 22-man film yet. That's coming. Don't worry. So I'm curious to see if you'd see something different from looking at that play again. Maybe they showed a corner coming up or an outside linebacker, and then he stepped back. So, but hoping that they can make some fixes with the blocking schemes and the running game for next week, as we have a big opponent next week with the Baltimore Ravens. So very excited for that. But let's go ahead and James, do you want to talk more about offensive line, guys? What else did you see?
No, I didn't have anything major from the off. Bit of maybe some miscommunication on handing things off and picking up those twists and stunts and delayed blitzes. So I feel like that's something that's going to be cleaned up with time. This is the first week with Zach Frazier back into the lineup there.
Yep.
So I think these guys are going to communicate with each other better as things go on, and we'll see that chemistry redevelop as it was developing early on in the season.
Yep. Let's go ahead and bounce to the defensive side of the ball. What Pittsburgh Steelers love to talk about. So defensive line wise, I thought Larry Ogunjobi had actually a decent game this game. I thought Cam Hayward had a phenomenal game. He had the one ball batted down that TJ Watt almost picked off. Unfortunately, couldn't figure out where the heck it was. Larry Ogunjobi had 1 tackle for loss. Cam Hayward had 2 tackles for loss and 2 sacks on this game. I thought he was very disruptive on the interior. I think this is probably overall the most active we've seen the defensive line almost all year, I would say. I don't think they've gotten 2 sacks so far this year. Maybe Keanu Benton and Cam got one in the same week, but I don't think.
Nope.
So this
Benton doesn't have one yet.
So this is honestly the most active we've seen out of that interior defensive line, if you don't include those outside linebackers. That we've seen all year. So that's good news, especially when you got to see what TJ was going up against all game long. So I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to say. I thought, again, Cameron Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi had really good games. Isaiah Loudermilk had registered a tackle. So did Keanu Benton. Keanu Benton also had a pass breakup as well, but was able to bat down a ball. So active arms, baby, active arms.
I think for me, a dominant performance from Cameron Hayward. And a lot of what we're getting used to with Larry Ogunjobi, where he makes one flash play and then the rest of the game disappears. Mm-hmm. Especially if it's run at him, he is really struggling in run defense and is just not a scheme fit in the 3-4 defense at all. And it has a lot to do with his lack of length in his arms. He can't get off a block to save his life. When you do see him trying to make a tackle on the run, if he does make it, it's because he got penetration and he beat his guy. It's never a stack and shed situation where he gets rid of the blocker. And a couple of times I saw him attempting and diving at legs as he's going backwards and getting driven into the ground. So I differ from you on how Larry's game. I thought it was one good play in a rough game outside of that. I also didn't think Keanu Benton had his best game. A few times we saw the run game just being funneled towards him and him just not holding up. And I think a little bit of this is because he got himself in better shape this year, dropped a few pounds so that he could be better as a pass rusher. And in so doing, has a little bit less sand in the pants against the run game. And I really feel like what Pittsburgh should be doing in the offseason here, I feel like Pittsburgh should be targeting a nose tackle for next season and moving Keanu Benton to the outside. I think Keanu Benton is a better fit as a defensive end in this scheme than he is as a nose tackle. And that's something that if they're able to make that change, I think that this defense is going to look way more stout against the run. Because right now, Keanu Benton is just struggling in those double team situations because he's just not heavy enough. And he's not heavy enough because he's trying to be in better shape to rush the passer. So that's my only thing with the defensive front is I feel like Cam Hayward can't do it all. And that's part of the reason that we're struggling against the run is we're just not getting enough out of the other defensive linemen against the run right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to see us pick up a guy like Mason Graham in the draft. I don't think he'll be available wherever we wind up being, but getting that interior defensive tackle might help a lot. Nick, what you got?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, James. I also am, quite frankly, a little bit nervous about, to say the least, about the run defense that we've got going here. I was looking into the stats a little bit. Four of the recent touchdowns scored against us were rushing touchdowns. Three of which came in this game, and two of which in the past two games came from fifth round running back picks in Tyrone Tracy from last week with the Giants, and then I believe his name was like McIntosh or something, was the third string running back for the Commanders behind Austin Eckler. So lots of rushing touchdowns there. Last weekend we put up over 100. They put up over 160 rushing yards
Jeremy
against us, which was a lot
McNichols.
more.
McNichols.
Jeremy McNichols, thank you. So yeah, we had two games recently with large rushing gains, and we still have to play the Ravens and the Browns twice, which puts us up against Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb twice in the upcoming games. And I'm not looking forward to having to face either of those teams if they can get the ball anywhere near the goal line. Because like you said, Cam Hayward can't do it all. I also would really like to see early round nose tackle taken in the draft. I think that's one of our most glaring weaknesses right now. But Cam Hayward's still there for the time being, which is holding us together barely.
Yeah. And going back to look at this real quick, Derrick Henry is averaging 6 yards an attempt right now. So that is, I mean, that's huge. You also have Lamar averaging, actually, they're both roughly averaging 6 yards per attempt on their rushes. So going to be very interesting to see how Pittsburgh handles that running game next week as we enter into the first of many divisional games. Since, you know, we decided to wait till the end of the season to play any of them. So that'll be very interesting. Moving on to these outside linebackers, I thought that they had a phenomenal game, given the fact that they were being held almost every single play. I think once I saw that TJ was getting held and it wasn't getting called, I think I counted 4 plays where there were blatant holds that I feel like you see called every single game. They weren't like little bit here and there. They were like arm up around the neck, holding as TJ's already passed the defender. It happened in the end zone that it could have been a safety. It happened to Alex Highsmith at one point. And then this is something that I'm interested to hear you guys take on. Also, Preston Smith registered a sack in this game, the guy that we just brought in. So that was huge. But I want your guys' input on something. I know that the NFL is all about player safety, this and that. I believe that player safety was the issue that led to Alex Highsmith's injury in this game. And we'll get to more about the injury after the game. But I felt like Alex Highsmith was kind of pulling up, not wanting to fall on or basically tackle Jalen Daniels in this game, and it led to him kind of awkwardly stepping and then stepping on Jaden Daniels' foot and leading to an injury. What are your guys' takes on that? And then also talk about the outside linebacker room.
I think just a little bit of bad luck there with Alex Highsmith. You know, how many times does somebody step on another foot and not roll their ankle that severely? So I don't necessarily say that because of a player safety rule, that's why Alex Highsmith hurt himself in this situation. Just more bad luck. And boy, is it bad timing too. My thing with the outside linebacker room right now is these guys are getting to the quarterback in an incredible fashion. Just like you said, a lot of holding penalties not being called that should be called. My concern right now is what happens this upcoming week. Alex Highsmith is expected to be missing 2 to 3 weeks at the minimum with this ankle injury. They are doing an MRI on it to see if there's any severe damage. It looked awful the way he wasn't even willing to put any weight on it. He was clearly in a ton of pain going against the Baltimore Ravens. If Nick Herbig isn't healthy, he's not your best run defender anyway, so you're probably better off with a heavier dose of Preston Smith than you are of Nick Herbig, unless it's a pass rushing situation specifically. And then I'm cool with Nick Herbig, of course, being out there in those 3rd and long situations. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world, Preston Smith going in there for Alex Highsmith. But my bigger concern here is that when we're getting gouged versus run, they seem to be running towards the interior and trying to stay away from our outside linebackers. And I would like to see the outside linebackers lining up a little bit more inside and forcing these plays to the outside.
Yep.
Allow the linebackers to do the run and chase that they're so good at, because our linebackers are more run and chase guys than they are stuffers on the inside. Landon Roberts is stuffer, but both Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson are run and chase guys. So let's start forcing teams to bounce it outside more, because I think it's a capability both of TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Preston Smith to be able to stack an offensive tackle and then kind of force it and then maybe even still make the play. But if you're lined up 2-3 yards outside of that offensive tackle, you can't help on an interior run play. So I'm really hoping to see that be something that is changed and have them line up inside a little bit more.
Yep. Nick, what do you got?
Nothing to add to that, really. I pretty much said it all. Just hope Alex Highsmith gets better in a good amount of time, and hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Fair. Interior linebackers, excuse me. I thought this was one of the greatest games we've seen from Patrick Queen as far as a run defense game. We haven't even gotten to see a lot of him in the way that we've wanted to see in pass breakups and in the pass coverage game. However, this game, we've talked a lot about Landon Roberts and, Peyton Wilson and their ability to play the run and their ability to stuff the run, or at least stuff runners in this game. There were 2 times that I can remember very clearly that Patrick Queen either hit the guy behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage and made the stop, made the play. I was very impressed with Patrick Queen this game. I thought it was a massive improvement. He had 2 tackles for loss, a pass breakup, and 7 total tackles on this game. Landon Roberts registered 5 total tackles. And then Peyton Wilson, I don't know if he, again, an injury thing or whatever, I felt like we saw less of him. Only 1 tackle recorded in this game. But again, it was nice to see Patrick Queen's improvement on that ability to stop the run.
Yeah, I thought a very disruptive game from Patrick Queen. He really covered a lot of ground in this game, was hitting people pretty hard too. So I liked what I saw out of him. Again, we're looking for that game where we get it from both guys, and we're still looking for the splash plays from our middle linebacker room, right? Where are the interceptions? Where are the forced fumbles? We don't seem to be getting that out of this room, so I'm really looking for that to happen. This upcoming week would be a great week for them to start doing it.
Yep. 100%.
Patrick Queen revenge game incoming.
If he's going to have his best game, this is it, man.
It's it.
I'm just
and
saying.
Him versus Derrick Henry, we're going to see a couple times for sure. So
that's not the greatest matchup.
It's
Patrick
not,
Queen,
but I think he's going to play pretty
he's a
well.
Small middle linebacker.
I think he's going to play fairly well. So I'm excited for that. Anything else for the middle linebacker room? No, before we move on. Cornerback room, secondary cornerback room, however we want to do this. Joy Porter, I feel like had a mediocre day at best. He had a couple penalties that cost us big. The one he played it perfectly. You just can't armbar. Like, you got your body in front of the wide receiver. Don't let him run through you. Play the ball. That's an easy no call in that situation. Maybe even an easy pick. I feel like that's just a thing that he's going to grow into. He's still young. It's only his second year. We don't expect him to be Deion Sanders out there or Rod Woodson or anything crazy like that. So give him some time to learn from that. Dante Jackson, I thought, had an okay game. Again, could have very easily had that blocked field goal. Unfortunately, didn't get there. What else did you guys see out of these guys? And is there anyone else you want to talk about in that cornerback room?
I felt like if anyone had a good game, it might have been Cam Sutton, getting a pass deflection later on in the game. He had some nice coverage snaps as well. Beanie Bishop kind of up and down too. So I kind of felt like the normal starting 3 were very up and down throughout the game. Nobody making big plays, nobody getting smoked badly either. Even James Pierre seemed to get a decent amount of defensive snaps, did register a pass breakup in this game, but it was on an underthrown ball that honestly he was beat on. Had it not been underthrown, he might not have been able to get in there and make the play. So I'm not 100% sure why Pierre got as many snaps as he did. I would much rather see any of the other 4 corners out there than see Pierre. So we'll see how this goes in upcoming weeks, as we're hearing that Corey Trice might be getting closer and closer to returning from his injury. And when he does, I think we'll see CJ Henderson be the odd man out.
Yep. That'll be unfortunate for him. Nick, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just was going to comment a little bit more on Joey Porter Jr. I thought this was one of his worst games of the season so far, and
Mm-hmm.
that's saying something, especially because he wasn't terrible. He just wasn't his normal caliber, in my opinion. There were a few times when he was beat where I thought he shouldn't have been, but that's obviously way better than anything I could do. But again, like you said, he's young, and the armbar mistake is something that he'll learn from, and I'm sure that Tomlin will highlight with him this week. To be like, hey, you can't be throwing that arm there. And if you don't, then we don't get the penalty, and it's a momentum shift, and that'll be a point of emphasis, I believe, this week to kind of like take these moments, coach these guys, and a lot of these younger guys who, once they iron out a few of these things that they still need to do, are going to be staples of this defense for a while. So it wasn't their best game, but it's still really positive that these are some of the worst mistakes they're making throughout the year.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Looking at the secondary, the safety room, Deshaun Elliott had a good game, 1 tackle for loss, 6 tackles. Minka a quiet game for Minka. He had one really big tackle that I remember where he stopped the guy from getting a first down. I don't remember what happened, if that affected the overall drive or not. But I was impressed with the tackle. Still waiting for Minka to kind of be Minka this year. I don't know what's going on. I feel like we're getting phenomenal play from Deshaun Elliott over and over and over again with some of the plays he's making. But Minka has no forced fumbles, no pass breakups no pass breakups in this game, but no forced fumbles, no interceptions. He's just kind of having a quiet year. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I feel like it's a bad thing.
It's a tough thing, right? It's a tough thing because in this game we saw him have a hit on a guy over the middle where he interception, doesn't get credited for pass deflection in that particular instance, but I feel like the hit that he put on the guy is exactly why it was an incomplete pass, and it should register as a pass deflection. Even if he didn't hit the ball, he's the reason that it was an incomplete pass. Previous to this game, on the entire season, Minka Fitzpatrick has only been targeted 15 times the entire season.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Only 15 times. That is very difficult to get interceptions when the ball's never being thrown your way. And I think that's exactly what's going on, is literally quarterbacks are doing it kind of like how Aaron Rodgers did against the Steelers in the Super Bowl that the Packers won. He looked around the field. Where's 43 at? I'm throwing it anywhere but where 43 is. I think that's what's happening a lot now, is that the quarterback opposing to the Steelers is looking, where's 39 at? I'm throwing it anywhere other than where 39 is. So tough to get interceptions when you don't get opportunities.
And I think that's why we're seeing so much out of guys like Deshaun Elliott and Beanie Bishop and all these other guys, is because they're getting targeted more. I saw a stat line last year, I believe it was for Trayvon Diggs, and people were singing his praises. And he's getting these interceptions because they're targeting him, because oftentimes he's in bad coverage. So they're going away from Minka because he's blanketing the guys that are around him. And like you said, James, when he lays those big hits, a multiple of the targets that have gone his way this year, he just lays the guy out, and the ball falls incomplete, even though the guy had a great chance of getting his hands on it. But it was just Minka was there. So if they can throw the ball anywhere from 39, like you said, like the Aaron Rodgers scenario, that seems to be what they're doing from what I've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting to see how the year's playing out for Minka. It's a good thing to some degree that he doesn't have the stats. It's a bad thing to some degree. I don't know how to, when you talk about the number of times he's been thrown in his direction, it's tough to kind of talk about that and put value on his playing time, because imagine what would happen if it was Terrell Edmonds. I mean, let's be real. It'd be much, much worse than this. So again, you got to take the victories when you get them. Bouncing over to special teams, Cordell Patterson had 3 kick returns for 61 yards. Nothing too crazy. Jalen Warren, 2 for 56, average 28. Calvin Austin, 3 punt returns, only for 20 yards. He got plastered on one of them. And let's talk about the other thing here. Calvin Austin had one great fake on a punt potential return where he made it look like he was going to fair catch it and he was going to catch it and this, that. And then that punt wound up sailing over him and getting into the end zone. I thought that was a phenomenal play, because that punt looked like it bounced slow enough that if they had tried to play it and known where it was going, there's a chance they could have got that in really, really bad field position for Pittsburgh. So a good play on that from Calvin Austin. And then, James, do you want to talk about the other special teams information here that includes one recently activated wide receiver?
What are we talking about?
Ben Skoranek, baby.
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say one thing that I like from the kick return numbers on this is that they finally kicked the ball towards Cordarrelle Patterson. He finally got some kick returns. And because he didn't do anything with those kick returns, anything significant, I think teams are no longer going to fear him.
Yeah.
Which is great for us because he's finally going to get some opportunities and finally get a chance to show exactly why he was signed to this team. I think we could end up with some real nice returns from Cordarrelle Patterson in the future here because of the fact that he didn't have any major ones when given the opportunity in this game. So that's actually really exciting to me, even though it's a pedestrian stat line there. It's something that could amount to big opportunities in the future here. But Ben Skoranek, go ahead, man. Talk about Ben Skoranek. Nice to have him back on the team here, huh?
Yeah. I mean, there was one punt that happened. Actually, there were two muff punts in this game. And thankfully, the second one bounced almost like right off the guy's face. And Ben Skoranek was right there playing, being the good gunner that he is, played the ball, got on it. And that was a huge momentum swing for us. And I think, did that wind up leading to our first or second touchdown?
Second touchdown. I believe it was actually Tyler Matakevich who recovered it because I saw him right there and I said, I don't know what he said to Zacchaeus, who was the guy who was trying to field it, but it looked like he got right up in his face and Matakevich bounced on it. I believe was the one who recovered it.
Ben Skoranek was given the stat and I saw him stand up with the ball. So they were both right there.
Yeah.
And so both the guys recently activated to the 53, so that we'll take that. Three guys in this game. Four if you include. So the two guys we just signed, Preston Smith and Mike Williams, and then also Tyler Matakevich and Ben Skoranek, immediately having impact in this game. You love to see that from those high caliber guys that you bring in and trade for, and then the low caliber guys that you bring in and reactivate or whatever that have been riding practice squads for most of their career or back end of the roster, and they come in and make plays. So love to see that from these guys. Sticking with special teams, Boz 4 for 4 on extra points. Boz for president.
No surprise.
And then Corliss Waitman, 5 punts, 212 yards, 3 of them inside the 20. One had a very good bounce. We got them down, I think, inside the 5 or the 10-yard line, something like that. So
one nasty shank too, but that's his first one of the season, I think. So
first one, and he was under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So you don't mind that being, if he has one every, what is it now? 7 games?
9 games?
9 games?
8, right? Because Cameron Johnson got hurt in the first game. So 8 games and only 1 bad punt. I'm in, man.
Yeah, sign me up.
That's a heck of a lot better than Presley was.
Yeah. So let's bounce over and talk real quick about these injuries. Alex Highsmith with that ankle injury. If you haven't seen it, it's all over online. Just look it up. We talked about it a little bit. Only expected to miss 2 or 3 games right now. And James, that matters because of a lot of things. 1, we may have a healthy Nick Herbig. And then 2, Preston Smith.
That's it, man. Looking like a genius of an addition. We thought it was maybe just an insurance policy. We'll see if we actually need to use it or not. Preston Smith might start this upcoming week against the Ravens. So not only did he have a nice game, get himself a sack, really get involved in this game and look the part. Honestly, he looks pretty mobile for such a big dude, too. I was impressed with how he moves.
He does.
Preston Smith DB highlights incoming?
Yeah, right? So guy moves good in the open field. He's got some good quickness for a guy his age. And that size of an outside linebacker is going to be very valuable against the run in this upcoming game against the Ravens. So hopefully we can see Nick Herbig come back from his injury as well. So that way there's a third guy that's a high value pass rusher that can be into the rotation here. If he's not able to play this upcoming week, I worry about the backup outside linebacker situation with Alex Highsmith expected to miss some more time. And it's really a shame, man, because when Alex has been healthy this year, he's looked incredible. He's really getting after the quarterback at a high rate, really beating offensive tackles up pretty badly. And looked like if he were healthy, he could have had his best season. And instead, now he's looking at his second significant injury on the season, which could have been a fantastic one for him.
Yeah. Very interesting to see this all play out. I'm excited to have the depth at the outside linebacker that we do. But again, you want to see Alex healthy. Alex has been dominating when he's in there. It's been real enjoyable to see that. And then Broderick Jones, dealing with a lower body injury, he did wind up staying in the game. Maybe that is part of the reason we struggled running the ball. I don't know. Broderick's been fighting injuries, it feels like, all year long at this point. Maybe you got to give him a week to rest, get somebody else in there. I don't know what the plan is. We'll see what they do this week. And then we'll definitely be ready to talk about the injury report and stuff like that on Friday's show. So excited for next week. It is Baltimore week. It's week 1, technically, of 6 division games, and 6 in 8 weeks it is, or something like that.
The gauntlet, including Kansas City and
Philadelphia.
Yep. 2 of the other opponents in that stretch. So, and Kansas City on Christmas, no less. So,
yeah, on Christmas on Netflix. Don't miss it. It's gonna be a good time for that game. Yeah, that's the third of 3 games in 10 days. So it's gonna be a fun holiday season for Steeler fans.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, brutal stretch, man. Brutal stretch.
Any final thoughts you guys have about this game or things you want to talk about?
Nick, I know you had a lot of notes. Is there anything?
We pretty much covered most of it. Let me see here, just flipping through. I mentioned the Dante Fowler stuff. I was just going to mention, the block on Dante Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
They almost I thought it almost should have been a face mask too, because they got around him and you see him do like a barrel roll on that. Mm-hmm. And he goes like this at the ref, and the ref just goes like this. So he watched the whole thing and still didn't call it, which I thought was a little bit out there. But other than that, just really happy about the additions of the new guys, both making an impact within a very short time frame, and especially with Preston Smith, and especially with how he's going to most likely be integral in these next coming weeks with Alex Highsmith possibly being out. I was really happy with his play this week, as well as in his presser, how he was excited about getting into a scheme that he was more feeling like was a good fit for him. So he's going to have more time to prepare this week, and I'm excited to see him hopefully have some more splash plays against a very much needed splash play team, the Ravens, that we'll be playing this week.
Yeah, very excited for this remainder of the season. It's going to be very interesting. Again, it's going to be a gauntlet, as James called it. So thank you guys so much for watching or listening. Be sure to like and follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell. It's free. It doesn't cost you a thing. Don't forget the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts as well. Make James down here very, very happy. And until next time, this is your host, James Cody, with special guest Nick, signing off.
Peace.